Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more 2025 to 2026 state governments and officials. It's meant to be Wednesday's video, but we're doing it now. Okay. In this video, we are looking at the state of Pennsylvania. So let's hop into this here. Pennsylvania's nicknamed the Keystone State. And as you can see, the map of the contiguous U.S. right here in this little upper corridor. If I can get the mouse to move. There we go. But yeah. The largest city is Philadelphia, but the capital city is Harrisburg. So yeah. Let's see. It is a commonwealth, which is the third of the four we have looked at. Kentucky, Massachusetts, and now Pennsylvania. It is in the mid-Atlantic, the northeastern, the Appalachian, and somehow the Great Lakes, well, I guess technically the Great Lakes region of the U.S. Bordered to its southeast by Delaware, Maryland to its south, West Virginia to the southwest, Ohio to its west, and the Canadian province of Ontario to its northwest, via Lake Erie, New York to its north, and the Delaware River and New Jersey to its east. Its capital is Harrisburg, and most populous city, Philadelphia. It is the fifth most populous state in the U.S. with over 13 million residents, and the ninth highest by population density, since it is the 33rd largest state by land area. So yeah, it is the largest metropolitan statistical area in southeastern Philly, centered on Philadelphia, and Commonwealth's most populous and sixth most populous city in the U.S. Its second largest metropolitan area on the other side of the state is Pittsburgh, Greater Pittsburgh, centered in and around Pittsburgh. So yeah, the big cities of Philadelphia on the east, and Pittsburgh on the west for the state. And of course, like we said, capital is Harrisburg. Now, with that, let's take a look at the Constitution of Pennsylvania. All acts of the General Assembly, the governor, and each governmental agency are subordinate to the state's constitution, and since 1776, its constitution has undergone 5 versions. Pennsylvania held conventions in 1776, 1789 to 90, 1837 to 38, 1872 to 73, and 1967 to 68. And the current Constitution entered into force in 1968 and has been amended numerous times. For amendments to happen, there needs to be a proposed modification that receives a majority vote of 2 consecutive sessions of General Assembly, and then it needs to be approved by the citizen electorate. Emergency amendments are permitted by a vote of 2/3 of the General Assembly and of an affirmative vote by the electorate within 1 month. In such emergency situations, Commonwealth election officials are required to publish notice of the referendum on a proposed amendment in a minimum of 2 newspapers in every county. In an event that more than one emergency amendment is proposed, each additional amendment is to be voted on separately. So yeah. Looks like we have 11 articles, 2 schedules for the most recent Constitution, the current one for Pennsylvania. But yeah. Now, let's look at the government of Pennsylvania. Again, it is a commonwealth in addition to being a state. Its legislature is known as the General Assembly and is bicameral with an upper house, the Senate, and lower house, House of Representatives. You have a governor, cabinet, there is a lieutenant governor, and the judiciary. Let's go ahead and take a look at the executive branch. And I looked at these earlier and I thought it was interesting because your governor, lieutenant governor, Democrats, attorney general, auditor general, Republican, treasurer, Republican. So it shows you how mixed the state is for the positions. It's a very middle way state. All members of the executive branch are not on the ballot in the same year, so they do kind of vary when they get elected. All members, though, that are elected like that, serve for four-year terms with a maximum of 2 terms. So, governor, lieutenant governor, elected, and then the next even year after their election, if there's not a presidential election, the other 3 statewide offices are elected. The treasurer, auditor, and attorney general. Okay. The governor does have a cabinet. As you can see there, a number of options. The Pennsylvania Bulletin is the weekly gazette containing proposed, enacted, and emergency rules, and other notices and important documents which are codified in the Pennsylvania Code. So yeah. With that, let's hop over here and look at the state's elected officials via the government page. Your governor, Josh Shapiro. Your lieutenant governor, Austin A. Davis. That's the cabinet. This is the Attorney General, David W. Sunday Jr., the Auditor General, Timothy DeFore, and the Treasurer, you don't have our Treasurer on the, oh, there it is, Pennsylvania Treasurer Stacey Garrity. So with that, let's look at the governor's cabinet. The Secretary of Administration, Neil Weaver. Secretary of Aging, Jason Kavalik. Secretary of Agriculture, Russell Redding. Secretary of Banking and Securities, Wendy S. Spiker, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. Secretary of the Budget, Zachary Reber. Secretary of Community and Economic Development, Rick Steiger. Secretary of Conservation and Natural Resources, Cindy Adams Dunn. Secretary of Corrections, Dr. Laurel R. Harry. Secretary of Drug and Alcohol Programs, Dr. Latika Davis Jones. Secretary of Education, Dr. Carrie Rowe. Director of Emergency Management, Randy Padfield. Secretary of the Department of Environmental Protection, Jessica Shirley. State Fire Commissioner, Thomas Cook. Secretary of the Department of General Services, Reggie McNeil. Secretary of Health, Dr. Deborah L. Bogan. Secretary of Human Services, Valerie A. Arkush. The Insurance Commissioner, Michael Humphreys. The Secretary of Labor and Industry, Nancy Walker. The Adjutant General of Pennsylvania, Major General John R. Pippy. The Secretary of Policy and Planning, Akbar Hossain. The Secretary of Revenue, Pat Brown. Secretary of the Commonwealth, Al Schmidt, which would probably be something akin to Secretary of State. Your Inspector General is Michelle Henry. Lieutenant Colonel George Bivens is your acting state police commissioner, and the Secretary of Transportation, Michael Carroll. So yeah, that is a look at Pennsylvania's cabinet. With that, let's go ahead and look at the governor himself, the history, the line. First, we'll start off with the list of colonial governors, because remember, Pennsylvania is one of the original 13 colonies. And of course, the name Pennsylvania means Penn's Woods. William Penn, who the land was granted unto, Uh, your chief proprietor of Pennsylvania in the early era when it's still just a colony, William Penn, serving 1681 to 1718. So literally about 40 years. Then Hannah Penn served as acting proprietor for about 6 years. 1718, we get John Penn, who serves until 1746. Then we get Thomas Penn, 1746 to 1775. And finally, we get John Penn. I don't know if it's the same John Penn. Merchant. I don't think it is. Nope. And of course, he serves from 1775 to 1776, right before the Revolution. So, with that, there they've got a list of the government of Pennsylvania in the colonial days. Presidents of the council, deputy governors, lieutenant governor. It goes from deputy to lieutenant in the 1760s. Now, so deputy governor, proprietor, William Penn, who we mentioned before, president of the council, and then we had a change in deputy governor, change, then we get an actual governor, 1693. That first governor will be Benjamin Fletcher. He was also colonial governor of New York, 1692 to 1697. So first he was over Pennsylvania and then New York. Let's see, still under William Penn. That's the only one we have that's an actual, says governor. But yeah, there's a number of people involved in the early history of the state, going from the colonial days up until Revolution. And with that, if I can find my mouse cursor. Come on now. That brings us into the more modern era. And being one of the original 13 13, we start off with a Supreme Executive Council led by Thomas Wharton Jr. and George Bryan. Who is Thomas Wharton Jr.? Merchant, politician, first president of Pennsylvania following the Declaration. Then we get George Bryan assumes office after the death of Wharton Jr. And Bryan was a businessman, politician, first vice president and its second president, governor, following the Declaration. Early abolitionist. But he was only in office for about half a year. We then get Joseph Reed to take over as the Supreme Executive Council president, and Bryan goes back to being vice president for a while at least. But yeah, Joseph Reed, lawyer, military officer, politician, founding father, aide-de-camp to George Washington as Adjutant General of the Continental Army, fighting in several key battles in the American Revolutionary War. So clearly had an important part during that revolutionary period. His second vice president, Matthew Smith, he resigned shortly after. And then we get William Moore as a vice president, who was a statesman, politician of the Revolutionary era, serves as vice president of Pennsylvania and then its president of the Supreme Executive Council. Was the only man formally elected to both offices. He was also a judge, legislator. So yeah, he played an important part in Pennsylvania politics. Then we get in office as Supreme Council Executive Council President John Dickinson, big name in Revolutionary American history, founding father, attorney, politician, serving in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Wilmington, Delaware. He is known as the penman of the Revolution for his 12 letters from a farmer in Pennsylvania. Yeah, a lot of the writings, a lot of the signings in the Continental Congress and stuff. He's one of the names you often see tied to, like, Pennsylvania for signing stuff. He had a vice, well, let's go back and look at Moore. Moore had James Potter as a vice president, who was a soldier, farmer, politician during the colonial and revolutionary era, rose to rank of brigadier general in the Pennsylvania militia. So yeah, James Ewing was Dickinson's first vice president. Soldier, statesman, politician during colonial and revolutionary and post-revolutionary eras. Was in the Pennsylvania General Assembly and vice president of Pennsylvania, which is like lieutenant governor, of course. We've already mentioned that. Then we get James Irvine. Didn't we already have Irvine before? Nope. Okay. James Irvine. Soldier, politician during the colonial, revolutionary, and post-revolutionary eras. An officer in the Continental Army, a member of the Pennsylvania General Assembly, and Vice President of Pennsylvania. And then the last one for Dickinson was Charles Biddle, statesman and member of a prominent family, the Biddle family of Philadelphia. So, okay. He stayed also for the next president of Pennsylvania, Benjamin Franklin, American polymath, writer, scientist, inventor, statesman, diplomat, printer, publisher, political philosopher, one of the most influential intellectuals of the time. Yeah. And was a drafter and signer, along with Jefferson, of the Declaration of Independence. After Biddle for vice president, he had Peter Muhlenberg, clergyman, military officer who served during the Revolutionary War. Was a member of the Muhlenberg family political dynasty and became a respected figure in the newly independent United States. He would resign shortly before Franklin's term ended, and at the end we get David Jeremiah Reddick as Franklin's last vice president. Surveyor, lawyer, politician. After Franklin, we get Thomas Mifflin as the last state president of the Supreme Executive Council of Pennsylvania. Mifflin was a merchant, soldier, politician, and founding father. Signed the U.S. Constitution and the first official governor of Pennsylvania, because, as we've been mentioning, there wasn't governors in the beginning. It was presidents of Pennsylvania. And as his vice president, we have George Ross, a politician in the late 18th century. The 1790 Constitution abolished the council and replaced the president with a governor, establishing a 3-year term for governor commencing on the third Tuesday of December following the election, with governors not allowed to serve more than 9 out of any 12 years. The 1874 Constitution lengthened the term to 4 years and prohibited governors from succeeding themselves. And then the current Constitution allowed governors to serve 2 consecutive terms with no lifetime limit. But you can only serve 2 lifetime terms in a row. Let's see. So we also, so no longer president and vice president of the Supreme Executive Council of Pennsylvania. It's governor, lieutenant governor. So Thomas Mifflin continues on as first governor. Yeah. And after him, we get Tom McKeon, a lawyer, politician, and founding father. Delaware delegate to the Continental Congress in Philadelphia. And he signed the Declaration of Independence and the Articles of Confederation, which, remember, was the government documentation before there was a constitution. There was a period there of about 14 years where we were under the Articles instead of the Constitution. After McKean, there was Simon Snyder. Come on, bring it up. Really? Third governor, 3 terms. Led the state through the War of 1812. Yeah, because remember, War of 1812, Britain comes back and says, no, we can take your sailors and force them into impressment, which is what the U.S. had been complaining about. And so the British came back and smacked us like an ungrateful child. After Snyder, we got William Finley, farmer, lawyer, politician, member of the Democratic Republican Party, served as 4th governor, and was a United States Senator. After him was Joseph Heister, 5th governor of Pennsylvania, member of the Heister family political dynasty. Stop that. So yeah. After him was John Andrew Scholes. Come on. Stop. There you go. 6th governor, member of the Muhlenberg family political dynasty. So another Muhlenberg. After him, George Wolfe. 7th governor of Pennsylvania, and recognized as the father of the public school system in Pennsylvania. And then after him, Joseph Ritner, governor number 8 of Pennsylvania, member of the Anti-Masonic Party. Stop moving, mouse. After him, David R. Porter, 9th governor, elected in office in the controversial 1838 Pennsylvania gubernatorial election, which was characterized by intense anti-Masonic and anti-abolitionist rhetoric during and after the contest. I gotta see what it says here. During and after the contest that sparked the post-election Buckshot War, which was an outbreak of unrest in the capital of Pennsylvania, Harrisburg, that transpired after the Pennsylvania gubernatorial and legislative elections, when both the Whig and Democratic parties claimed control over the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. And remember, it was a pushback against the... It was an election that had a lot of anti-Masonic and anti-abolitionist rhetoric. Which at that point, we know the Masonics were pretty big. George Washington and a number of the founding fathers were Masons. So, okay. And then 10th, we have Francis R. Shunk. Not a lot said about him. Let's see if we have anybody of note afterwards. Name William F. Packer sounds familiar. They don't say too much about him, though. Samuel W. Pennypacker, judge, politician, 23rd governor, was assigned as a judge to Pennsylvania's Court of Common Pleas. Okay. Anybody else we should be aware of? Gifford Pinchot, 4th Chief of the U.S. Division of Forestry, 1st Head of the United States Forest Service, 28th Governor of Pennsylvania. That's right. That's where I'm remembering the name Gifford Pinchot, because there's a national forest named after him. Gifford Pinchot National Forest. I thought the name sounded familiar. I'm like, Gifford Pinchot. Let's see. And we're getting into the modern era. Bob Casey Sr., Tom Ridge, and then your recent governor, the current one, Josh Shapiro. But I have to look at the governorships that have been the state and Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Now, let's go back and look at the legislature. Its name being the General Assembly. Bicameral, 253 members, 203 in the House of Representatives and 50 in the Senate. Speaker of the House or their designated Speaker pro tempore holds sessions of the House. President of the Senate is the Lieutenant Governor, who has no vote except in the event of a tie. The Assembly meets in Harrisburg in the Capitol. Members of the Senate and House cannot hold a position to any civic office, and both houses may expel a member with 2/3 of a vote. If they're expelled for corruption, they may never run again for re-election in either portion of the legislature. So let's hop up here. Pennsylvania General Assembly. The current House Speaker, Joanna Clinton, the current Senate President, Austin Davis, the Senate President pro tempore, Kim Ward. Now, the makeup of the Senate, which is 50 seats, is currently 27 Republicans and 23 Democrats. So Republicans with a narrow lead, and the Senate President is a Democrat, so in the cases of ties, yeah. So they've got slim margins to deal with. In the House, 203 seats, 102 Democrat, 101 Republican. As down the middle as you can be for the House. Yeah. Senate members serve for 4-year terms, and House members 2-year terms. Previously, in colonial times, the legislature was known as the Pennsylvania Provincial Assembly and was a unicameral body instead of bicameral. The Pennsylvania General Assembly has a lengthy history and one of the most openly corrupt state legislatures in United States, going back over 2 centuries into the era of the 13 colonies. 1794, while visiting the western side of Pennsylvania, Alexander Hamilton wrote to Rufus King, "The Pennsylvania putrefaction is greater than I had any idea of. The political putrefaction of Pennsylvania." So yeah, clearly there was a lot of corruption going on in the early assembly. It is the second largest state legislature in the nation, behind only New Hampshire, and it is the largest full-time legislature. Yeah, New Hampshire was crazy though. I think it had like 400 some members of its legislature. It's like, daggone. But yeah, Pennsylvania, the second largest, had the largest full time. So, is there any term limits? I do not know. Senators must be at least 25 years of age, and representatives at least 21 years of age. They must be citizens of the United States and residents of the state for a minimum of 4 years and reside in their districts for at least 1 year. Individuals who have been convicted of felonies, including embezzlement, bribery, and perjury, are ineligible for election. And then the Constitution says also if you're guilty of other infamous crimes, which has a broad interpretation by state courts at times. So, yeah. Maybe a little too general with the way it's trying to suggest, so yeah. That's a look at the legislature of Pennsylvania. And now let's go back here and look at the judiciary. 60 judicial districts, most of which, except Philadelphia, have magisterial districts, district judges, formerly called district justices and justices of the peace, who preside over minor criminal offenses and small civil claims. Alright, let's go ahead and dig over here. There was the assembly. That brings us to the judiciary. And we have at the top the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, the court of last resort, the highest appellate court, and it has 7 justices, so 1 chief judge, 6 associates. Under it is the Superior Court, and it's one of 2 Pennsylvania Intermediate Appellate Courts. Appeal to the Superior Court is generally of right from final decisions of the Courts of Common Pleas. Although different panels of 3 judges may sit to hear appeals, there is only one Superior Court. That is, Pennsylvania is not divided into appellate territories. The court is based in Harrisburg and sits to hear cases in Harrisburg and Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. They have the Commonwealth Court, which is the other intermediate appellate court. 9-judge court is limited to appeals from final orders of certain state agencies and certain designated cases from the Courts of Common Pleas involving public sector legal questions and government regulation. The Commonwealth Court also functions as a trial court in some civil actions by or against the Commonwealth government and cases regarding statewide elections. Courts of Common Pleas. They are the state's trial courts of general jurisdiction. 60 judicial districts, 53 of which comprise of only one of Pennsylvania's 67 counties and 7 comprising 2. Each district has from 1 to 93 judges. So yeah. They hear civil cases with an amount in controversy in excess of $7,000 and trials for serious crimes having original jurisdiction over all cases not exclusively assigned to another court, and appellate jurisdiction over judgments from the minor courts. They also hear appeals from certain state government and most local government agencies. It also hears matters involving family law, such as adoption, divorce, child custody, abuse and neglect, and guardianships, juvenile delinquency, trust and estates such as probate, and charitable organizations. The first judicial district in Philadelphia has a specialized business court docket, which was established in 99, and the 5th Judicial District in Allegheny County, Pittsburgh, the Commerce and Complex Litigation Center, originally led by a couple of judges. So there's 2 sections like that. The 1st District and the 5th District. They have business court dockets. Pennsylvania statutory law also encourages the creation of commerce court programs in other judicial districts, as well as on the intermediate appellate levels. Now, the magisterial district courts, the Commonwealth, consist of 67 counties, and every county except for Philadelphia County, there is a magisterial district court. These courts are inferior courts of limited jurisdiction and handle landlord-tenant matters, small claims, cases that involve an amount in controversy up to $12,000, summary offenses, violations of municipal ordinances, and preliminary hearings and arraignments in greater misdemeanor and felony offenses pursuant to Pennsylvania's rules of criminal procedure, which go on to be tried in the courts of common pleas. In some counties, such as Chester County, magisterial district courts may issue emergency protection from abuse orders given when the family administration offices of the courts of common pleas are closed. The magisterial district courts are divide up their jurisdiction by geographical location. Larger cities and municipalities may be divided. So yeah, there's a Pittsburgh Municipal Court and a Philadelphia Municipal Court as well. So they're the lower levels, but where they're also the bigger cities, they have their own specialty courts for the city stuff. So, but that's a general look at the courts. Let's go ahead and look at the members of the Supreme Court, and we'll go ahead and end this episode because I know it's already been a long one. The members of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Your current Chief Justice is Deborah Todd, with Associate Justices Christine Donahue, Kevin Dougherty, David Wecht, Sally Updike Mundy, Kevin Brobson, and Daniel McCaffrey. So, yeah. But we'll go ahead and end this episode there. Like I said, because it's been a long one. Anyway, as always, educate thyself. Educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll be putting these links and sources in the description box below the video. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.